A native woman was stealing eggs. Then the cowboy caught her and said, "Come and bring your kids." The morning was still dark when the cowboy stepped outside his small wooden house. The sky was just beginning to change color, moving slowly from black to deep blue. The air was cold and quiet, the kind of quiet that made every sound feel louder than it really was. He pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders and walked toward the chicken coop, his boots pressing softly into the dirt. For nearly a week, eggs had been disappearing. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a fox, maybe a raccoon. That happened sometimes out here, but the coop showed no damage, no broken wire, no signs of a struggle, just fewer eggs each morning. And not just one or two, sometimes half of them were gone. The cowboy was not a rich man. He worked hard for what he had. Those eggs mattered. He sold some in town and kept the rest for himself. Losing them meant less money and less food. Still, something about the situation felt strange. Whoever was taking the eggs was careful, almost respectful. That was why he woke up early that morning. He wanted answers, not trouble. He leaned against the fence near the coop and waited, staying very still. The chickens were already awake, moving quietly inside, feathers rustling. The smell of hay and earth filled the air. Time passed slowly. His hands grew cold. Just as he wondered if he had made a mistake, he noticed movement near the far edge of the coop. A shadow moved carefully, staying low. He straightened, his eyes focused. A woman stepped forward. She moved slowly, as if every step had been practiced. Her clothes were worn and thin for the cold morning. A long scarf was wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was pulled back, but loose strands fell around her face. She carried a small cloth bag in her hands. The cowboy stayed where he was, watching. She reached the coop and gently opened the door. She did not rush. She did not scare the chickens. She spoke softly to them, words he could not hear. One by one, she took the eggs and placed them into her bag, counting under her breath. She looked around often, her body tense, ready to run. The cowboy felt a mix of feelings rise in his chest. Surprise, confusion, and something else he did not expect, sadness. This was not the behavior of someone trying to cause harm. This was someone trying not to be seen. He stepped forward, his boot snapping a small twig. The sound was sharp in the quiet morning. The woman froze. Her hands tightened around the bag. Slowly she turned to face him. Her eyes were wide, dark, and filled with fear. For a moment neither of them spoke. The chickens clucked softly behind her. "I was wondering who it was," the cowboy said finally. His voice was calm but firm. The woman swallowed. She took a step back, then another. Her eyes searched for a way out. She looked ready to run. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, raising one hand slightly, showing it was empty. "But those eggs belong to me." She nodded quickly. Her lips trembled. She opened the bag and held it out toward him as if offering it back. "I can leave," she said softly. Her English was careful, slow. "I'm sorry." He looked at her face, really looked. She was thin. Her cheeks were hollow. There were dark circles under her eyes, the kind that came from long nights and worry. Her hands were rough, red from cold and work. "Why are you taking them?" he asked. She hesitated. Her fingers tightened on the bag again. She looked down at the ground, then back up at him. For a long moment she said nothing. Finally she spoke. "My children are hungry," she said. "We don't have much." The words hung in the air between them. The cowboy felt something shift inside him. He had expected excuses, anger, lies, but this was different. There was no story to hide behind, just truth. "How long?" he asked. "A few days," she said. "I didn't take many at first." "Only what we needed." He nodded slowly. He thought about the mornings he had complained about missing eggs. He thought about how he still had food in his house, still had coffee to drink, still had a warm bed. "Where are your children?" he asked. She glanced toward the trees beyond the fence. Her shoulders stiffened. "Not far," she said. "They're waiting." The word struck him hard. "Why didn't you ask for help?" he asked gently. Her eyes dropped again. "People don't like us asking," she said. "They don't listen." He did not argue with her. He had seen enough in his life to know she was telling the truth. The sun began to rise, casting a soft orange light across the land. The chickens settled back down, the moment of tension slowly fading. He took a breath. "I won't call anyone," he said. Her head snapped up. She looked at him, disbelief clear on her face. "I just want to understand," he continued. "You didn't come here to cause trouble." She shook her head quickly. "No, I promise." He studied her again, the way she stood ready to flee. The way her eyes kept drifting toward the trees, toward her children. "Are they nearby?" he asked again. "Yes," she said. "I told them not to move." He looked toward the trees, then back at her. "Listen," he said slowly, "I don't like stealing. But I also don't like seeing people go hungry." She waited, holding her breath. "Come and bring your kids," he said. The words shocked even him as they left his mouth. Her eyes widened. "What?" "Bring them here," he said. "I want to meet them." Fear flashed across her face. She stepped back. "Why?" "So I can see who I'm helping," he said simply. She hesitated. Every instinct in her body told her not to trust this moment. Trust had failed her before, but there was something in his voice that felt different. Not pity, not power, just honesty. "They're shy," she said quietly. "That's all right," he replied. "I won't scare them." She stood still for a long moment, then finally nodded. "I'll get them," she said. She turned and walked toward the trees, moving quickly but carefully. The cowboy stayed where he was, giving her space. He leaned against the fence again, his mind racing. He thought about his parents, long gone now, about the hard years when food was scarce and pride was all they had left, about the strangers who had once helped him without asking for anything in return. He watched the trees. A few moments later, movement appeared. Small shapes stepped out from behind the trunks. Children, 3 of them. They stayed close to the woman, holding onto her clothes. Their eyes were wide with fear and curiosity. The cowboy straightened, removing his hat. He wanted to appear smaller, less threatening. "That them?" he asked gently. She nodded. "They don't need to be afraid," he said. "They're welcome here." The children did not move closer. They stared at him, silent. The woman looked back at them and spoke softly in her own language. Slowly, step by step, they moved forward. The cowboy felt the weight of the moment settle over him. What had started as missing eggs had become something far bigger, something human. He did not know yet how this story would end. But standing there in the growing morning light, watching a mother and her children take hesitant steps toward him, he knew one thing for sure. This was not just about eggs anymore. The children stood close to their mother, barely moving. Their clothes were worn and a little too big, as if they had been passed down many times. The youngest held tightly to her hand, while the older 2 watched the cowboy with careful eyes. None of them spoke. The cowboy stayed where he was. He knew sudden movements could frighten them. He slowly knelt down so he was closer to their height. The ground was cold, but he did not mind. "Good morning," he said gently. The children did not answer. One of them hid behind their mother's leg. The woman spoke softly to them, her voice low and calming. Slowly, the oldest child nodded and took one small step forward. It was not much, but it mattered. The cowboy smiled, not wide, not forced, just enough to show he meant no harm. "My name's Thomas," he said. "I live here." The woman looked at him, surprised. "I'm Layla," she said after a moment. "These are my children," he nodded. "It's good to meet you." The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. The sun was higher now, warming the land. A light breeze moved through the grass. Thomas stood up slowly. "You must be cold," he said, "and hungry." Leela's shoulders tightened at the word hungry, but she did not deny it. "I have food inside," he continued. "You don't have to take anything else from the coop." She hesitated. "We don't want trouble." "You won't find it here," he replied. She looked at her children, then back at him. Her face showed years of learning not to trust easily, but her children's eyes were tired. That made the choice for her. They followed him toward the house. Inside, the air was warmer. The house was simple: a small table, 2 chairs, a stove, and shelves filled with tools and jars. There was no luxury, but there was care. Everything had its place. Thomas motioned toward the table. "Sit," he said. The children sat slowly, unsure if they were allowed. Leela stayed standing, watching everything. He placed a pot on the stove and began cracking eggs into a bowl. The sound made Leela flinch. "They were going to be breakfast anyway," he said without turning around. She relaxed just a little. Soon the smell of cooked eggs filled the room. He added bread and poured water into cups. He placed the food on the table and stepped back. "Go on," he said. The children stared at the food. The youngest reached out, then pulled back their hand, looking to their mother for permission. Leela nodded. They ate quietly at first, very quietly, as if the food might disappear if they made a sound. Then slowly they ate faster. The older child finished their plate and looked down, embarrassed. Thomas noticed and gently added more food without a word. Leela watched him closely. She expected something in return, a demand, a lecture, but none came. "Where are you staying?" he asked gently. "Near the river," she said. "In a small shelter." He nodded. He knew the place. It was not safe when the weather turned bad. "And their father?" he asked, careful with his words. Her jaw tightened. "Gone," she said simply. He did not ask more. After the children finished eating, they leaned back in their chairs, full and sleepy. The youngest smiled for the first time, a small, shy smile. Thomas felt something heavy settle in his chest. "I don't want you stealing," he said gently, "but I understand why you did." Leela looked down. "I didn't want to," she said. "I had no choice." "There's always another way," he replied. "Sometimes we just don't see it." She looked up at him then. "What way?" He thought for a moment. "I need help around here," he said. "The work is honest, feeding animals. Cleaning, mending fences, I can pay in food and some money." Her eyes widened slightly. "You'd trust me." "I already do," he said. "You came back with your kids, that tells me enough." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. "I can work," she said. "I work hard." "I can see that," he replied. The children watched their mother closely. They did not fully understand the words, but they felt the change in the air. Something was shifting. Thomas stood and handed Leela a small bag. Inside were a few extra eggs and bread. "For tonight," he said. She took it with shaking hands. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, as the sun dipped low, Leela and her children returned to their shelter. The food kept them warm and full. For the first time in days, the children slept without crying. The next morning they returned. Leela arrived early, ready to work. Thomas showed her what needed to be done. She listened carefully, memorizing everything. She moved quickly and quietly, never wasting time. The children stayed nearby, helping where they could. Days passed like this. One day turned into three turned into a week. Trust grew slowly, not through promises but through routine, through shared silence, through meals eaten at the same table. Thomas noticed the children laughing more. He noticed Leela standing taller, less afraid. One evening, as the sun set, Leela spoke. "I never thought someone like you would help someone like me," she said. Thomas leaned against the fence. "People are people," he replied. "That's all." She nodded, thinking about his words. The eggs in the coop were no longer disappearing, but something else had appeared in their place. Hope. And neither of them realized yet how deeply this choice would change both their lives. The morning sun rose slowly over the wide, empty fields surrounding Thomas's small ranch. Birds chirped and moved through the trees, and the air smelled fresh and clean. Leela and her children arrived quietly, carrying small bundles with a few things they owned. They had slept better than they had in many nights, full from the food Thomas had given them and with the hope of work ahead. Their steps were careful, but there was a sense of relief in their movements now. Thomas watched them from the porch. He noticed how the children's faces were brighter, their eyes more alert. Even the youngest held her head higher than the day before. It was strange to him how quickly life could change when someone offered a hand instead of judgment. He motioned for them to come forward, and Leela led her children closer, their small hands clutching his extended ones before stepping aside. "Today," Thomas said gently, "I want to show you around. There's work to do, but I'll guide you. You won't have to be afraid." Leela nodded, her lips pressed together as if she were still unsure. She had spent too long surviving alone, relying on her own careful steps. Trust did not come easily, yet something about Thomas's calm manner told her that he meant what he said. He started with the animals, showing her how to feed the chickens and collect fresh eggs. Leela listened attentively, repeating his instructions softly. She moved carefully among the hens, respecting their space and keeping her movements slow. The children watched from a distance, curious and cautious, but the youngest eventually stepped forward, mimicking her mother's gentle motions. Thomas smiled quietly. "They're learning fast," he said, "and you too." Leela looked up, almost surprised. "You really don't mind me being here?" she asked. "I mind a thief," he said, shaking his head slightly, "but I don't mind a mother trying to feed her children. I understand the difference." It was a relief for Leela to hear, yet she still felt nervous. She had lived in a world where people often judged before they listened. She knew that one mistake could ruin everything. But Thomas's words, paired with his actions, showed a different way, a way that relied on understanding rather than punishment. After the animals, Thomas showed Leela how to mend fences and clean tools. Each task was explained carefully, step by step, and she repeated the actions until he nodded in approval. It was tiring work, but Leela did not complain. She was grateful for the opportunity to earn a living and to provide for her children without fear. The children played nearby, learning small tasks under careful supervision. They carried water from the well and helped sort eggs. It was not much, but it gave them a sense of purpose. The eldest child, who had been the most wary, now moved confidently, occasionally smiling at his mother as if to say, "We're safe here." By midday, the work was done. Thomas invited them all to eat together. The table was simple, with bowls of porridge and slices of bread. The children ate quickly at first, hungrily consuming each bite, then slowed as they began to feel full. Leela watched them closely, a mixture of relief and cautious happiness in her eyes. "You see," Thomas said gently as he poured water into the cups, "working together makes life easier. You don't have to struggle alone." Leela nodded. She wanted to believe him, and little by little she did. She had been alone for so long, and yet here was someone offering not just food but trust. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling, but it gave her hope. After the meal, Thomas suggested they take a short break before continuing. Leela and her children moved outside, stretching their tired arms. The youngest child looked at Thomas, then at her mother. Leela nodded, giving the silent permission for the child to approach him. Thomas crouched down to the child's level. "Hello there," he said softly. "I'm glad you're here." The child hesitated, then offered a shy smile. Thomas smiled back, and the tension that had been there the first morning began to melt away. Over the next few hours, Thomas showed them more of the ranch. He introduced Leela to the small vegetable garden, teaching her how to water plants and remove weeds. He explained the importance of care and patience, both for plants and for life itself. Leela absorbed every word, realizing that this work was not just about survival. It was about building something lasting. The children helped as much as they could, learning simple tasks like collecting herbs or tidying the tool shed. Thomas praised their efforts, encouraging them gently. The eldest child began to take pride in the small accomplishments, and Leela noticed a growing confidence in both her older children. As the day wore on, the sun grew hot, and the work slowed. Leela and Thomas sat for a moment on the porch, watching the children play in the distance. "You trust me," Thomas said softly, almost as if thinking aloud. I want to," Leela replied, "but it is hard." "I understand," he said. "Trust is not built in a day. It grows little by little through actions, not words." Leela thought about her life before this morning. The long nights of hunger, the fear of being caught, the feeling of having no one to rely on. And now, here she was, sitting across from someone who did not judge her for her mistakes, someone who had given her a chance to provide for her children with dignity. By late afternoon, they returned to the animals one more time. Leela fed the chickens again, carefully placing the food and collecting the eggs. The children helped and Thomas watched, impressed by how quickly they were learning. As they finished, Thomas clapped his hands lightly. "Good work today. I think we can all rest now." The children cheered softly, happy for the break. Leela smiled, a genuine smile, and thanked Thomas quietly. Before leaving for the night, Thomas gave Leela a small bag of extra food to take home. "For you and your children," he said. "Use it however you need." She accepted it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered again. "I don't know how to repay you." "You already are," he replied. "Just keep doing your best." That night, Leela and her children returned to their small shelter. The food lasted through the evening, and the children went to sleep with full stomachs and a sense of safety they had not felt in months. Leela sat for a while outside, looking at the stars, thinking about the day. She realized that the world could be different, that kindness could exist even in unexpected places. The next morning, they returned to Thomas's ranch, ready to continue the work. Each day, trust and respect grew a little more. Leela worked hard, her children helped where they could, and Thomas treated them all with patience and care. Slowly, the fear and desperation that had shadowed their lives began to fade. Leela started to hope again, not just for food, but for a future where her children could grow up safe, fed, and confident. She realized that mistakes do not have to define a person, and that help can come in the most unexpected ways. And through it all, Thomas quietly observed, knowing that this small act of compassion would leave a lasting mark on all of their lives. The simple decision to offer understanding instead of punishment had begun to change everything, planting seeds of hope that could grow far beyond the eggs or the work they did each day. By evening, as the sun dipped low again, the family sat outside together. Leela watched her children play in the soft light, laughing freely for the first time in months. She felt a warmth in her chest, a gratitude she could not fully put into words. Thomas looked on, satisfied in the quiet knowledge that this was more than just work. It was the start of a bond that would give these children the chance to grow strong, safe, and hopeful. And in the calm of the twilight, it was clear that what had started as a desperate act of stealing had turned into something far greater. The first steps toward trust, security, and a future built told the next morning. The sky was painted with soft streaks of pink and orange. As the sun rose over the ranch, Leela and her children arrived quietly, carrying the few belongings they had with them. The youngest clutched her mother's hand tightly, while the older two walked with a mix of curiosity and caution. They had grown more confident since the first morning, but the world had taught them to be wary of strangers. Thomas watched them approach from the porch, noting how much they had changed in just a few days. Their faces were brighter, their movements steadier, and there was a spark of trust in their eyes that had not been there before. Thomas greeted them warmly. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm and friendly. "Ready for another day?" Leela nodded, and the children mumbled quiet greetings. They had learned that Thomas's tone meant safety, and slowly, the youngest relaxed her grip on her mother's hand. "Today, I want to show you more of the ranch," Thomas said. "There's work to do, but you'll learn new things, and I'll guide you every step of the way." They followed him first to the garden, where rows of vegetables and herbs grew. Thomas explained how to water the plants, remove weeds, and check for signs of damage. He spoke gently, encouraging Leela to ask questions if she was unsure. She listened carefully, repeating his instructions silently as she worked. The children watched her, learning by imitation, their hands moving slowly but with care. As they worked, Thomas noticed Leela's quiet determination. Every action she took was deliberate and careful, showing respect for the work and the land. He realized that she was not just a mother trying to feed her children. She was someone who valued effort, someone who would do her best when given the chance. The midday sun climbed high and the work slowed. Thomas invited them to eat together, setting out bowls of porridge, slices of bread, and fresh eggs. The children ate quickly at first, hungry from the morning's labor, then slowed as they felt full. Leela watched them, a mixture of relief and pride on her face. "You're learning fast," Thomas said kindly, "and you're doing a good job." Leela looked at him, her lips pressed together as she considered his words. "I want to work," she said softly. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," Thomas replied. "You're showing strength." "That's something to be proud of." The children listened, absorbing the conversation even if they did not fully understand every word. They could sense the change in their mother, the quiet confidence growing in her with each passing day. After lunch, Thomas suggested they return to the animals. Leela fed the chickens and collected eggs with growing skill, while the children helped carry water and feed the other animals. The work was tiring, but the sense of accomplishment was stronger than any fatigue. Thomas praised their efforts gently, making sure they felt valued for their contributions. By late afternoon, they had completed the tasks. Thomas motioned for them to sit on the porch and rest. The children played nearby, their laughter ringing softly through the air. Leela sat next to Thomas, her eyes following the children as they moved about the yard. "I never thought someone would help us without asking for something in return," she said quietly. Thomas nodded. "Kindness doesn't always need a reason. Sometimes it's enough to see someone struggling and choose to help." Leela considered his words. For so long, she had lived in a world where survival meant hiding, stealing, and fearing every stranger. Now she was beginning to see a different way, a way where help was offered without judgment, where mistakes did not define a person. The evening came, and Thomas prepared a simple dinner for all of them. They ate together, talking quietly and laughing softly. The children shared small stories from their day, and Thomas listened, asking questions and encouraging them. Leela felt a sense of belonging she had not known in years. After dinner, Thomas handed Leela a small bag of food to take home for the night. "For you and your children," he said. "Use it however you need." She accepted it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to repay you." "You already are," he replied. "By working hard and caring for your children, that's enough." That night, Leela and her children returned to their small shelter. The food lasted through the evening, and the children went asleep full and content. Leela sat outside, looking at the stars, thinking about the day. She realized that life could be different, that trust could exist even in unexpected places. The next morning, they returned to Thomas's ranch, ready to continue their work. Each day, trust and respect grew stronger. Leela worked hard, the children helped where they could, and Thomas treated them all with patience and care. Slowly, the fear and desperation that had shadowed their lives began to fade. Weeks passed, and the routine became natural. Leela and her children were no longer strangers in the space. They were part of the daily rhythm of the ranch. Leela's confidence grew as she mastered the tasks, and her children flourished under the guidance and encouragement Thomas provided. One afternoon, Thomas watched as Leela taught her eldest child to water the garden carefully. He noticed the pride in her eyes, the way she encouraged rather than scolded. He realized that this simple act of work and guidance was teaching more than survival. It was teaching life lessons about patience, responsibility, and care. That evening, as the sun set, they gathered on the porch together. The children played quietly, tired but happy. Leela spoke softly to Thomas. "I never thought someone would treat us like this, like we matter." "You do matter," he said. "Every person matters, every effort matters, and you're showing that in every small step you take." Leela felt tears in her eyes. She had spent years hiding, surviving, and fearing judgment. Now she saw that kindness could open doors, and trust could build bridges that fear had once burned. The family sat together as the sky darkened, the first stars appearing above. For the first time in a long time, they felt safe, not just from hunger, but from the world that had always seemed harsh and unforgiving. Thomas looked at them and felt a quiet satisfaction. What had started as a desperate act of survival, a mother taking eggs to feed her children, had grown into a bond of trust, respect, and hope. Through patience, understanding, and simple kindness, he had helped change lives. And as the night settled over the ranch, it was clear that this was only the beginning. The lessons of care, compassion, and trust would last far longer than any single day. Leela and her children had found safety and guidance, and Thomas had learned that even a small act of understanding could have a profound impact. The work continued, the days passed, and each morning brought the same promise, a chance to build a life grounded in respect, effort, and hope. Leela watched her children grow more confident, more playful, and more secure. She realized that true strength was not just in surviving, but in trusting and teaching others. The simple routines of the ranch, the feeding of animals, the tending of gardens, the cleaning of tools, were more than chores. They were lessons, a way to show the children that life could be orderly, fair, and safe. And each day, as Leela worked alongside Thomas, she felt the weight of fear lifting from her shoulders, replaced by the quiet power of hope and determination. By the end of Part 4, the bond between them was clear. Leela and her children were no longer outsiders. They were part of a small community built on trust and mutual respect. And Thomas had learned that sometimes, giving a chance was the most powerful act of all, capable of changing lives in ways that no punishment or anger ever could. The early morning air felt different now. It was no longer filled with fear or uncertainty, but with routine and quiet confidence. Leela and her children arrived at the ranch just after sunrise, as they had been doing for weeks. The children ran ahead this time, their laughter carrying across the fields. Leela followed them, walking with a steady pace and her head held high. Thomas stood near the barn, watching them approach. He noticed how natural everything felt now. What had once been an unexpected meeting had turned into something steady and meaningful. The ranch felt alive in a new way, not just because of the animals or the land, but because of the people who now shared the work. "Good morning," Thomas called out. "Good morning," the children replied together, their voices bright. Leela smiled and nodded. "Good morning." They got to work without needing much instruction. Leela fed the chickens, checked the garden, and cleaned the tools. The children helped where they could, carrying small buckets and gathering vegetables. Thomas watched quietly, offering guidance only when needed. Later that morning, Thomas called Leela aside. His tone was calm but serious. "I've been thinking," he said. "You and your children have been doing good work here, honest work." Leela felt her chest tighten. She had learned not to expect good news too easily. "Yes," she asked carefully. "I want to make this arrangement more permanent," he said. "There's a small cabin near the edge of the land. It's old but strong. If you want it, you and your children can stay there." Leela stared at him, unable to speak. A place to stay. A real place, not a shelter made of scraps, not a spot hidden away from the world. "You don't have to decide right now," Thomas added. "I just wanted you to know the option is there." Tears filled Leela's eyes. She quickly wiped them away. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." That evening, Thomas helped them move their few belongings into the cabin. It was small, with rough wooden walls and a simple stove, but it was clean and dry. To Leela, it felt like a palace. The children explored every corner, their excitement clear. The youngest laughed as she ran from room to room, touching the walls as if to make sure they were real. "This is our home?" one of them asked. Leela knelt down and held them close. "Yes," she said, "it is." That night they slept under a solid roof for the first time in a long while. The wind moved gently outside, but it could not reach them. Leela lay awake for a while, listening to her children breathe, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over her. The days that followed were filled with steady work and small joys. Leela became skilled at managing the ranch tasks. She knew the animals well now, understood the garden, and helped Thomas plan the work ahead. The children grew stronger and more confident, learning responsibility and kindness through simple routines. Neighbors began to notice the changes. Some were curious, others cautious. Thomas spoke plainly when asked. "They're good people," he said. "They work hard." That's all that matters. Over time, the questions stopped. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Leela and Thomas sat on the porch watching the children play. The land glowed with warm light and everything felt calm. "I used to believe the world only took," Leela said quietly. "That it never gave anything back." Thomas nodded. "Life can be hard, but it's not only one thing. Sometimes it gives when we least expect it." She looked at him. "You changed our lives." He shook his head. "You changed your own. I just opened a door." The children ran toward them, laughing, full of energy and joy. Leela watched them and felt pride rise in her chest. They were no longer afraid. They were learning what safety felt like. Seasons passed. The ranch changed with the weather, and so did the people living there. Leela's children grew taller, stronger, and more curious about the world. They learned to read simple signs, count eggs, and help with planting. Thomas taught them patience and honesty, not through lectures but through example. One day, as Leela worked in the garden, she paused and looked around. She realized she was no longer just surviving. She was living, truly living. That evening, they shared a meal together. The table was full, not just with food, but with warmth and laughter. Stories were told, simple moments shared. As the night settled in, Leela stepped outside and looked at the stars. She thought about the woman she had been when she first took those eggs, afraid, desperate, and alone. That woman felt like someone from another lifetime. Thomas joined her quietly. "You did good," he said. "So did you," she replied. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sky. What had begun as a moment of desperation had become a story of understanding, effort, and kindness. No one had been saved by force or pity. Instead, lives were changed through respect and opportunity. And on that quiet land, under a wide open sky, a family found safety, a man found purpose, and a simple act of compassion proved that even the smallest choices can change everything.